It is definitely the most visually stunning grimoire in existence. There may be modern grimoires done in the last 20 or 30 years, but this is traditional stuff. It's beautifully executed. Each of the pages is a separate plate, fully colored.
Salutations, listeners, and welcome back to Glitch Bottle, where we uncork the uncommon in magic, mysticism, and the generally misunderstood. I'm your host, Alexander F., and today we are excited to welcome back to the podcast internationally acclaimed author, practicing magician, and scholar, Dr. Stephen Skinner. Listeners, I would definitely encourage you to check out Dr. Skinner's previous appearances on the podcast if you haven't already. He's written more than 46 books, translated into more than 20 different languages, and he received his PhD in classics from the University of Newcastle for his research on the Greek text of the Greco-Egyptian magical papyri and a number of Latin grimoires. But in this episode, Dr. Skinner shares about Sibley's Clavis, or Key to the Mysteries of Magic, co-authored with Daniel Clark. Now, this is a massive 523-page book in full-color grimoire, described as the high point of Victorian grimoire manuscripts. Dr. Skinner shares about the interesting history of this manuscript and how Dr. Skinner and Daniel Clark first approached this specific text. Also, Dr. Skinner shares about the unique advice on binding and compelling spirits that is contained within the book, something that's not typically found in other grimoires. He also talks about the intricate calligraphy and coloring of this beautiful tome. And Dr. Skinner has advice for magicians just starting out. We talk about the existence of Dr. Thomas Rudd and so many more topics. And now, returning to help us uncork the uncommon, I give you Dr. Stephen Skinner. Dr. Stephen Skinner, as always, thank you so much for the generosity of your time and joining us again on the podcast.
My pleasure to be here.
Dr. Skinner, this is 523 pages. Can you kind of talk about the genesis of how yourself and Daniel Clark came to present this full-color grimoire to the world?
Sure. The grimoire itself is 271 pages, full color. In addition to that is my transcription of it, which makes it much easier reading, and introduction. And then Daniel's done historical stuff about the people which were involved with this grimoire. It's quite an interesting document. It was, in fact, Daniel Clark who drew my attention to it, because I didn't realize it even existed. When you think about grimoires, some of them have got red and a few other colors, but this one has got the most amazing pentacles and circles and a lot of text explaining what to do with them. So when Daniel told me about it, I thought, oh, another grimoire. Well, yeah, I'll read it sometime. But he insisted, and when I looked at it, I was just knocked out. And the person who did it, or originated it, was Ebenezer Sibley. And he's a sort of key player at the end of the 1700s, 1790s. He was single-handedly producing huge volumes on astrology. One of them ran to more than 1,000 pages. Also works on magic. He started off with astrology, and in fact his biggest astrology book had a small section at the back which said, oh, don't confuse astrology with magic. Magic's another thing altogether. And he got such a response from that little bit at the back that he then went on and did more. So this grimoire, the core, which is Solomonic, was done by somebody called Rabbi Solomon, not claiming to be King Solomon in this case. And it exists in a couple of French manuscripts. And Sibley translated that manuscript into English. And then various things were added to it after that. Full 10-whole books, as it were, in there. So there are pentacles for each day of the week, for each of the 7 planets. And there are pentacles in there which don't appear in any of the standard Key of Solomon that we've seen. The third section, he goes into specific experiments with 4 specific spirits, showing not just how to invoke them, but even amazing paintings of what they look like, a little bit scary, one of them, and going through which circles to use. And these are the spirits Berto, Visago, Agares, and Bilfaros. Some people listening will know that 2 of those are from the Goetia, but his approach and detail of the seals and so forth is pretty unique. He then gives circle and layman for all 4 spirits. Then there's a section which is like a mini magician's tables, which he refers to as the Wheel of Wisdom, with correspondences, so that's pretty straightforward. And then something which was added afterwards, probably by Frederick Hockley, is the Secret and Complete Book of Magic Science, with a number of very beautiful plates showing seals, characters, perfumes. And inside of that, it goes into the bond of spirits, how to actually bind the spirits, something which is not touched on in any detail in virtually any other grimoire, and a key important thing. The 6th part is crystallomancy, probably Hockley again, because he was very, very keen on crystal gazing. It has, again, more on binding spirits, but also on the equipment used with crystal gazing. And then there's a fascinating section which he calls Miscellaneous Examples and Experiments, where there are particular talismans for keeping spirits or people out of your home. Invocation of spirits of Venus into the crystal. There's just so many things. The contents page goes on page after page. There's a section on geomancy, and then there's some very interesting magical experiments. And finally it finishes up with magical tables. And then to that, Daniel Clark, who worked on it with me and who drew my attention to it, has done some brilliant biographies of the people involved. Ebenezer Sibley, John Denley, who owned the magical bookshop in the early 1800s, Robert Cross Smith, Major Irwin, and Robert Thomas Cross, who's quite often confused with the previous guy. And then there's a full transcription, so you don't have to read the handwriting if you don't want to, although the handwriting is beautifully done and is quite readable. So when I actually saw this, I thought, yeah, this has got to be published. Joseph Peterson did a clavis or key, I think about 8 or 10 years ago, and there's some duplication on the first part between that and this one, but this one has got everything in full glowing colour, and there's a lot more additional bits on the back. So I thought this is not really a conflict, because I would not like to conflict with anything that Joseph's doing, because he does some fabulous work.
Dr. Skinner, to that point, can you talk about the similarities and differences between, and I'm thinking of course, 2 queens of England and the periods that mark them, but this specific grimoire, which, as you say, might be described as the high point of the Victorian era, and another very lengthy, very lavishly illustrated grimoire, the Book of Oberon, regarding a source book of Elizabethan magic. And someone mentioned, oh, this is kind of interesting. There's, an entire compendium of different areas, spells, workings with spirits. Can you just kind of share, was this, along with the Book of Oberon, is the Mysteries of Magic kind of one of the major compilations?
Yes, this one is quite unique. There is overlap with the Book of Oberon because Robert Cross Smith owned the Book of Oberon, if I'm not mistaken. At least 1 or 2 of the people who contributed material to the Mysteries of Magic actually owned the Book of Oberon, or actually Oberion is the name of the spirit. And so in my commentary on it, I've reproduced some of the old drawings about the circle used in invoking Oberion and the form in which she appears. But it just really shows that there was a lot of passing backwards and forwards of material in those days. This Mysteries of Magic Sibley is well organized and logically developed. The Book of Oberon has a number of sections in there that didn't seem to me to be a logical development through. It seems rather like working magician's manual where stuff has been added as it's been done or done as it's been added. But that's an excellent book, and it's amazing that it took this long to come to light.